what we're talking about. So what is Operations Hub? Why is Operations Hub awesome? And what we're talking about today. So we're going to go over what is Operations Hub for folks who are just coming in, some cool use cases, and then my favorite part of all of these, which is questions and live workshopping. So if there are things that you want to build, if there are questions of, hey, how can I do this? Or you're just curious about anything pertaining to Operations Hub, throw it in the Q&A. We'll tackle all of those at the end. And Max and I'll do some live solutions design and hopefully put you on your merry way to building some really amazing stuff on top of Operations Hub at the end of this. So the first section we're going to go over is about Operations Hub and what the product does. So jumping into this, so what is Operations Hub? Newest hub from HubSpot, really amazing, something we're really excited about. Two main really parts of functionality. So one is going to be expanding your workflows, expanding some of your data sync tools, giving you new functionality in HubSpot, and also bringing native code running inside of HubSpot for the first time. And the part that is so exciting about Operations Hub is it allows you to take HubSpot not just as a sales and marketing and service solution, it's something you can use to run your whole business, all within operations, which is really, really exciting. So for what Operations Hub can help you do on our next slide here is you can sync and clean your customer data. Max is going to go through some cool examples of how you can do that. You can use my favorite feature, which is custom coded programmable automation, so that you're not just limited to actions HubSpot has pre-built for you, but anything you could possibly want to do, and being able to sort of expand some of your reporting capabilities inside of HubSpot as well. There are two flavors of Operations Hub. If we jump to our next slide here, for two package options. So the first one is Starter. There is a free version of Operations Hub as well. Allows you to do data sync, standard fields. You can connect to a whole bunch of different applications. You will find those in the marketplace. But with Starter at $50 a month, you're going to be able to add historical sync, and you're also going to be able to add custom field mappings to that syncing. So when we started this series, that was contacts only. It now supports contacts and companies and other objects and more functionality coming here soon. Also in professional, you're going to unlock programmable automation. You're going to add webhooks, and you're going to basically add the ability for you to do anything you can imagine inside of workflows that you previously couldn't by writing code directly into those workflow tools. So I'll touch a little bit on super cool ways that you can use that. Lots of cool things that we've been able to build and create. But we're going to go through a couple of examples. I see a couple of questions showing up in the chat already. If you do have questions, throw them in the Q&A. We'll go through them at the end. But if you even have things that just pop in your head as you go, throw them in there. We'd love to talk about them. So Max, I'm going to give you this first one for how to use Operations Hub to help you with complex lead routing.
Yeah, absolutely. So to kind of frame this one up, I remember one of the toughest things that I had to deal with when I was onboarding customers is when we would be setting up workflows and they had a very, very large sales team, right? That's kind of spread out everywhere. Maybe they're, aligned to certain geographic areas or zip codes, or, they have some other bits of information sitting in another system that really should be dictating who gets assigned what leads, right? And what used to be super frustrating, and maybe some of the people who are watching this will kind of resonate with that, is if you wanted to build workflows that would run all of that logic in order to be able to assign people to the right sales rep, you'd usually have to deal with building like tons of different workflows that looked like giant endless Christmas trees that had a whole bunch of crazy if-then branches. Or maybe you'd even have to deal with like using like an API to like bring in a bunch of data to sit inside of HubSpot on contact records or whatever it may be, just so you could use that information for the logic in these workflows. And that just added a ton of extra work. And it was usually like pretty frustrating. And those workflows could get very complex, not only because of, just all the data you're bringing in, but just the sheer number of like actions that are built into the logic that you're using. Something that I think is really cool with custom coded actions. So if you look at HubSpot's pricing page and you're looking at the thing that says programmable automation, like what is that? What that literally did is it added a action in a workflow called a custom coded action, right? So if you have Operations Hub Pro, you'll go in there, you'll see custom coded action. And basically what that allows you to do is write some code or a script that can do a number of different things that a regular workflow action can't do. So how does that kind of lead back to lead routing? Maybe we could go to the next slide here. So instead of building all these intense and crazy and super complex workflows to account for every single possible situation on how you actually route your leads to the right sales rep, you could simply have a custom coded action here that either like has the logic built into it, so it's all contained within one action, or if you need to reference information in another system, or maybe, for example, you have like a HubDB database or something like that filled with like information on how you route your leads and what sales reps are aligned to what geographic or zip code or something like that. You can reference information outside of HubSpot or somewhere else within HubSpot using that custom coded action, and then it would output a value that helps you just simply assign whoever that lead should be going to, right? So if you have the developer resources to custom code that, you can really start to simplify your workflows and cut down on the amount of data you need to bring into HubSpot just to run complex lead routing, right? So just one example of the almost infinite things you could probably do with a custom coded workflow, but that's one that particularly sticks out to me. And when I saw this, I was like, wish I had this years ago, right? So,
and I know in our early days too, we had a customer who had, I don't know, a couple hundred reps. And one of the biggest things that we did under a retainer was like, they would go and update a Google sheet somewhere with like, oh yeah, we've changed who's going to handle Georgia now. So like, can you guys fix that? And it's like, yes, we can get this done this week. And then it's an hour or two of like parsing through the workflow and testing it and making sure Georgia routes the right way. And instead it's just hey, here's this coded action, reference this table. Someone can go and update that table and it works now, which is amazing.
Yeah. Or even to kind of build off of that, like, and again, I'm not a coder, right? So the people who are much smarter than me would kind of understand how to do this better. But, another thing you may have to deal with when you're talking about like reps in HubSpot is like, maybe for instance, it's kind of tough if someone leaves, right? You have to go and like see like who's in the rotator and like pull them out of it, depending on how you build it, of course. But like, if you have some other system that keeps track of, for instance, maybe when people are out of office, or maybe when someone like leaves and they're not in like your Active Directory anymore, or something like that, right? Maybe it's looking at that for information on how it should be routing it within your workflow, right? So again, the possibilities are kind of limited by your creativity, I would think.
Like a Google calendar that stores who's out of office, like your PTO calendar is pretty cool.
There you go.
Cool. We'll jump to another example here. And if it's got your brain thinking about cool ideas, throw them in the Q&A. We'll touch on them at the end. So the next one we'll talk through a couple of examples here, both using data sync with other tools, but also some of the native functionality inside of Operations Hub here, but how you can use Operations Hub to automate your data formatting and keep your CRM nice and squeaky clean to power all of your workflow. So Max, I'll let you take the first piece of this.
Yes, because I know this is a problem that pretty much everyone has, right? So how frustrating is it? And I know this is the operations one, but I'm sure there are some people who have dealt with this before. How frustrating is it when someone comes to your website and fills out a form, but they are one of those folks that capitalizes their entire name, right? It leaves caps lock on all the time, whatever it is, but they fill out their name on a form and they don't use proper, they're just yelling at you like, my name is Max, and they want to like, scream it into the form, right? So what's tough about that is like, you don't want to have to be like manually going through all your new contact records that are getting created and ensure proper capitalization is in there, right? So you can actually set a workflow. This is like the other one in here. So when we say data quality automation on the HubSpot pricing page, what that does is that adds this format data action, which can do a number of different things. This is just like one of like the more simpler actions it can do. But essentially what it could do is basically say like, okay, if someone fills out a form, ensure their name has the proper capitalization, right? So that way, when you go and send them automated emails that use personalization tokens that pull their first name in, it's not pulling in the all caps version that they left you on the form, right? So it's cleaning that up. So they're not receiving emails that say, hey, Max, in all caps, because that doesn't look professional. It doesn't really look like we have our stuff together when that happens. So just one simple one that I know a lot of people can relate to.
Cool. We have another one on our next slide here that we want to talk about in terms of NetSuite. So one of the things we run into with lots of customers is that they are using another ERP, another financial tool. They're tracking their billing contacts and who they're interacting with in another system. And so something awesome. This is also possible on Operations Hub Starter. So this, all you need is the starter tier. This isn't custom code. You can point and click, configure this. And what you would do is you would use the Operations Hub Starter. You would connect the NetSuite connector, and then you can start syncing your contacts from the two property on your contact record in NetSuite that indicates this is the correct billing contact. This is the person we should be communicating with around stops and starts and communications about service or financial information. You can sync that back into HubSpot, and you can have lists in HubSpot that show you all of your billing contacts, or you can exclude billing contacts from certain notifications or specifically communicate to those billing contacts. And these are the types of functionality with Operations Hub that you can click, create, map a couple fields, and turn it on. And you don't need to be a developer. You don't need to write custom code. You can sort of sync and merge and manage that information back and forth between those two tools. So really awesome way to expand the data set inside of HubSpot with some of your other connected systems and tools. Jumping into our next example, this is one that's a little bit more complex here that we want to speak to that we did for a customer recently. So this is a scenario where we have a customer, they're managing tons and tons of events. So they have live events, they have workshop events, they have webinars like this one. Some of them are meetings, some of them they can't sync back to HubSpot because they're not running on top of a connected meeting application. And they're trying to figure out what is the impact and what is the influence of all of these different events I'm doing. I think just recently I saw this specific example in the like partners Facebook group with someone asking, hey, how do I do this for super advanced HubSpot users? So for this example, we're going to run through how they can make this happen. So their end goal was, how can I get a report and a dashboard, and how can I see what the impact of my events have been across all of these different things I'm doing, and who came to them, and did they generate deals, and what all happened. So let's jump into this specific use case. So for this use case, what we did is we built a custom object for events. So what the team is doing is anytime they have a new event, they go create that new custom object, they add that event into their system. It sort of is an event just like this one. It would say, hey, here's our Operations Hub workshop for Operations Hub Pro users. And what we would do is we would add those events into the system. And then what they're doing is when someone fills out a form on the websites, this would be like the registration form, right? So when the registration opens, you would be able to submit those forms would come through. You would put in as a hidden field which event they're registering for. So the ID for that particular event. And then what we're doing is we're using an Operations Hub coded action that then runs. It goes and finds all of the contacts that have that event ID, and then it links them to that event. So then what we can do is on that event record, if we open that event and we go to our next slide here, we'll talk about sort of how we can expand this to deals. But first, we're associating those contacts to those events. So now if we look at our events, we have a list of contacts that are associated. And then what we're doing is when a deal is created or a deal's marked closed won, we're then going and fetching all of the contacts associated to that deal, and then all of the events that those contacts were associated to previously, and linking the deal to those events. And so now what we can do with two coded actions, the first coded action says, when a form is submitted, go find the corresponding event, link it together. When a deal's created, go find any events related to those contacts and link those together. And now using calculated properties on those events, we can show how many contacts came to those events, how many deals were created against those contacts, how many of those deals were won, what's the total dollar value of all of those deals. And we can do really amazing reporting all natively inside of HubSpot and start to create really advanced attribution functionality all around those in-person live events imported via a spreadsheet or created automatically in the system. And you can do tons and tons of amazing things. And I think this is a really good example that I like to talk about of where when we think about some of the functionality you can achieve with custom objects and coded actions is you can build any type of an application or any type of structure on top of HubSpot, and it can work alongside all of those other tools that you use every day for your marketing, your sales, your service functionality. And you can really extend what HubSpot's capable of, which is why we think think Operations Hub is so exciting. Those are the ones that we came prepared to sort of to debrief to people. We're going to start going through the Q&A at the top of this. With the first question from Angela that I just saw is like, will there be a recording? Yes, there'll be a recording. It'll get sent out after this. And this will, I think, be available on demand. Jan would have more details there, but we're going to go through the Q&A. If you did throw questions in the chat, if we get to the bottom of the Q&A, we may scroll through the chat and try to find additional things, but we'll try to tackle everything in the Q&A first. So Max, I might let you take the first one, which is Operations Hub versus Service Hub, and where those two things are different. I don't know if you're on mute or if I lost you with audio.
No,
Hopefully
it's because I had
right,
my
cool, you're good.
fancy cough button turned on my mixing board. All right. You can hear me now? We're good? Sweet. So Service Hub was sort of like the last piece of the puzzle that HubSpot needed from a product perspective to complete the whole attract, engage, and delight phase of things, right? So if you think of Service Hub, that is basically our like customer service software, right? So it helps you do things like manage tickets. So if your company has a support team or a customer service team or something that fits into something close to those categories, they can use tickets to track the way that they resolve problems for your customers, right? So a ticket is kind of like a deal record, only it's really tracking the act of helping someone with something versus selling something. The other thing that comes with Service Hub too are things like the knowledge base, so you can build like a knowledge base of frequently asked questions and things like that, as well as surveys for your customers. So really things to help keep track of how well you're servicing your customers and being there for them when you need them most, or when they need you the most. Operations Hub really kind of touches the entire product because it's really a whole bunch of tools that help you manage the flow and hygiene of data coming in and out of other systems, and also like the data that's kind of talking to the other parts of HubSpot too as well. So it's like backend data management is like the easiest bucket to kind of like put it in, whereas Service Hub is like customer service centric software. I hope that answers the question. If not, I'm happy to clarify.
Cool. I'm going to pick up another one of these that's in here. So there's one that I think was very, very cool in here, which is it possible with Operations Hub to have a master ticket to link to other similar tickets? And once the resolution email is sent to the master ticket, it will automatically send to all linked ticket contacts. And I assume that's across all of those tickets. So where we see situations like this, so like Jira as an example, right, has this concept of like, oh, there's this issue is linked to a project, this project linked to an epic. And so you can sort of like have a hierarchy and a relationship there. The first thing that we're going to need to solve for this particular use case is how to get these tickets linked together. And so I think in order to do that, you're going to need I would recommend probably a custom object, something like an issue. And then you would basically create an issue. So let's say your issue is like, I'm trying not to pick specific HubSpot issues that I run into. Your issue is that your cough button sometimes gets sticky and it doesn't unmute you on your live webinars. And so you have this issue and you have tons of users submitting something like, hey, I'm trying to uncheck this button and it's not unmuting me. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, we have a whole bunch of other people who had this problem. So you would create a custom object for an issue. You would create an issue that's like stuck cough button, right? And you would link all your tickets that come in with people asking about the cough issue to that particular issue. And then based off of that issue status, and you could also keep in mind, you could do this automatically too. You could use an Operations Hub coded action to when a ticket's created, does it have, hey, my cough button stuck in the description or some of these other things, go find the cough button issue and link it to that issue. And then once that cough issue is resolved, so let's say you go and you deploy a firmware update so that it auto detects coughs now using machine learning. It's super advanced. You're a cool tech company. And what you're able to do is then you resolve that issue, and then it could go and update every ticket related to that custom object, and it could mark all of them resolved, and it could email everybody linked to all of those tickets. And so that's, I think, a really good example of where with custom objects and Operations Hub, you can really build an entire new layer on top of HubSpot for what you would sort of be able to do directly out of the box. So I think that's a really good example actually of Service Hub plus Operations Hub, and some really cool things that you could do with that. Max, I'll defer to you if there's one in the Q&A you want to pick up, and I'll look through if there's another one I want to grab.
Yeah. I want to, I want to try to answer Chris's here, or at least give a bit of a solution, because honestly, Chris, this might be something I'd have to like look at a little bit more. But you asked, I would like to build a report that allows me to filter tickets based on create time so I can separate tickets received during business hours from after business hours. I don't see a create time ticket property to use as a filter. Yeah. So there's a create date, but that's not giving you a create time, right? And you basically want to separate tickets that come in after business hours versus ones that happen during business hours. So obviously I'm kind of throwing this out like on the fly here. So like I would love to double check my work in the back end. And Connor, I know you mentioned something in the chat here. So I don't know if there's something else you want to throw in here.
I have an idea.
Yeah, I have an idea too. And it may not be exactly what you're looking for, but it looks like your end result is that you're trying to really just see which ones come after business hours, which ones come after before, right? So what you could do is you could build a custom ticket property called like, time received or during time received, right? Business or non-business hours, and have it basically be a dropdown. And you could have a custom coded workflow action that when a ticket gets created, it goes and looks at like the actual time it was created. And then basically from there, there's a script that marks either, the time received either as during business hours or off business hours. And then you can build a simple report that filters on that property and just shows a number value for during business hours and off business hours. On top of that, maybe you could trigger some different workflows based on that. So if like a ticket gets created and it gets marked as non-business hours, send an email that says, hey, this ticket came after business hours or something like that. Wait for tomorrow to like hear from us or something along those lines. I don't know if that gets you all the way there, because I'm also like trying to think of like what a report would look like that has a whole bunch of different values for different exact moments in time, right? Which like kind of scares me a little bit, but Connor, I don't know if you had a different idea for that.
I agree with all of what you said. Is my first piece. I think the one thing that I may add there is for that reporting purpose is you may want to grab a field that lets you stamp sort of like the create time. You could also use you should be able to use a calculated property for like hours since that time, potentially, if you do sort of your time in different ways. Like if you're tagging, like if you're converting to like hours since the first of the year, hours since sort of that fiscal period or something like that, you could do that as well. So you could sort of see what those time differences look like. I think to your point as well, you should be able to, if you think about a date and a 24-hour clock, you should be able to do date created plus a like 1 through 24. And even if you don't have the exact time, it would let you report on like what's your ticket volume hour by hour, or you could do smaller increments depending on where your volume is. But I think everything you said is totally right. I think it's a really good solution as well. I have one in here. It's actually really similar and related from Christine, which is how would I leverage Operations Hub to 1, direct emails to Service Hub based on content, and 2, could it be used to update tickets so they are directed to a different agent when responded to by a client if the original ticket owner is out of the office or out of working hours? So I'm not sure I understand the first part, which is directing emails to Service Hub based on content, but let me speak to the second one, which is definitely, and that's one of the examples Max and I were sort of talking about during this first piece. So the first thing that you would need to do, and this is sort of the main precursor, is establish a way to determine out of the office, right? So is that a calendar? Is it you have an HR system and people are submitting for PTO, and you can sort of like have an API property that says, is this person out of the office or in the office? But the first thing that needs to happen is, and you could do this theoretically, I think you actually would struggle to do it in like this is not the user property, but wherever you're storing that information, right? Even if it's, I'm going to maintain a Google Sheet, I'm going to have a calendar that people sort of like add an event to as they're out of the office, which is something that we do internally. And then what you would be able to do, as long as wherever you're storing that information is accessible by API, you would then have an Operations Hub action that runs. So the ticket, when somebody responds to it, can automatically move to waiting sort of internal, or it's no longer waiting on customer. And you would have an Operations Hub ticket-based workflow that would run, and your custom code would fire when that ticket changes, and it would go and check, let me go look at the out of the office calendar, let me grab that ticket owner, and let me see if that ticket owner is on the out of the office list right now. And if the answer is yes, then it could toggle a property on the ticket that says, hey, owner out of the office. And then you could have a rotate action right after that says, if owner out of the office, then rotate this ticket to somebody else, or maybe you have a specific fallback person you want to assign that to. But you would then rotate that ticket, reassign that ticket would get updated. And then you would have whoever is the new person that's going to manage that ticket, they would get notified because they would take ownership over that ticket. And I think that's something you could definitely build. We use Rippling for HR. I know Rippling's API allows us to grab out of the office. And I think if you use like a Google Calendar that people added events to, you should be able to check if like, is the ticket owner email match the people who have events on this calendar, and you should be able to determine, are they out of the office? But that should be able to get you what you're looking for. And I think we run into those types of situations, especially with high volume of tickets or a really wide range of agents or time zones. And you could extend that same logic to time zones as well. If you had a table based off of like who's on during which time zones, you should be able to route tickets that way also. I'll kick it to you if you had one. Max, there was one in here, which I think is up your alley, which is what about names with a capital letter in the middle?
Yeah. So I was just staring at that one and I was trying to think about it because, you know, if it's hard where if you have like a name with no spaces, right? And someone's like, you know, let's say my last name is McRae, right? MC capital RAE, but it's like no spaces. It's hard for us to kind of know what you capitalize if it's all like one word. I haven't tested it yet if it's like a two word last name. But the other thing that I'm thinking of is that like if it is just the very first letter gets capitalized, and I'm fairly sure that that's the action in there, you could in theory also like do something similar through a custom script and a custom coded workflow action where it's like, all right, look at the, and again, I took some classes, but I don't know what I'm talking about. But like, look at the string. If there's a space, capitalize the first part and then the second part, something like that. Yeah.
If you ever want to be reminded that you actually don't know how to code, just play with some regex formulas and be like, I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah. I think what you could do, I actually didn't even think about your exception. Those Mick names, Irish is really hard, but you should be able to do this. So in Operations Hub, I think Starter, I'm not sure if it's in free. I know it's in Starter, so I'll say it's in Starter, and it may be free also. There is an action for change all characters to lowercase. And then you can do also capitalize first letter. So if you have a capital letter in the middle of a string, you should be able to lowercase everything and then change the first letter in the string to uppercase. To Max's point, you may misformat the people who have the mix or the O's or other ones in there, but
it's still better than all caps. Some of their names
break systems. Yeah. My partner's last name is O'Connor, which is also kind of funny and a separate thing, but it's like if she gets an airline credit, like she's currently in like Southwest hell because she has an airline credit and they're like, oh, well, this one has an apostrophe, but like your last name on the ID doesn't have an apostrophe. So like, I guess you can't have this anymore. And so I think that some of those people, you may be better off doing the capitalized first. And I think most of them will be okay with it. They might be the outlier, but that's a good use case.
And Kirsten, I know we have a call coming up soon, so I'll try to figure that answer out before we chat with the team.
Oof, you're gonna get Max in the flesh,
in the Zoom,
not in the flesh, in the Zoom.
Zoom flesh.
Let me. Here's one from Christine, and I'm not even. You may be able to do this without a custom coded action. Actually, I don't know. I will double check real quick. I'll read it and then I'll do a quick double check. I think you can do this without a custom coded action, but I can answer your question. So she's asking could Operations Hub be used to automatically create a new ticket if a client is responding to an already closed ticket? Clients constantly send new issues on old email strings. I don't think you need Operations Hub to do this. Max can keep me honest here, but there is a standard workflow action for create record, and ticket is one of the records that you are allowed to create. So you could have, if a client responds to a ticket and that ticket status updates, if you're stamping like this ticket was already closed, you should be able to have a workflow that says, hey, before we update this, was this ticket already closed? If yes, keep it closed and create a new ticket and like put these issues into it and generate it. And you should not need Operations Hub at all to do that. But you could do that in lots of more advanced and complicated ways with Operations Hub. So if you wanted to like clone the pre-existing ticket and like add it and then send an alert to somebody to like add more information, you could do a lot more. But the basic version of that you should be able to do with a standard HubSpot workflow with like an if then and then a create record action.
Yep. Yeah, I think that checks out. That situation can get very complicated in a number of different ways too, but yes. And then I think in any more the nuanced ones, a custom coded action like could definitely take care of any of those like outlier situations. Jan, it said you wanted to answer the question that Tom had at the top about the boilerplate.
Yeah, I was actually writing a response. I accidentally clicked the wrong button there. But
Okay.
Tom, you can expect an answer from me in the Q&A answer section.
Awesome. Should we talk about James right now? So James, you have a use case.
I was just about to read that one.
Yeah, so you have a use case where you have affiliates who sell products through Shopify on their own dedicated microsites. All right, so they have, okay, got it. So the Shopify integration passes the deal through the into the e-commerce deal pipe. All right, so you have a deal pipeline in HubSpot that's ingesting all of this through the deals API with the landing page URL. Okay, got it. So the landing page URL, you mean their dedicated microsite. So I'm assuming
yeah, there's like an ID match, right? Like the string on that, the string for the landing page URL corresponds to like which affiliate it is, and that's known as a pre-assumption.
Yeah. So yeah, we're assuming there's something in that URL that is unique to the affiliate, right? So you're asking, how can we use Operations Hub to cross-reference the landing page in the deal and assign the deal to the affiliate HubSpot user's account for use in sales commission and reporting? So you're talking about, so are these folks actually users in HubSpot? Maybe you could clarify.
I actually think even if they're, so we do something somewhat similarly actually to this using a coded action that I can speak to. And I think, so the difficulty you'll run into is HubSpot users don't have properties. So like you can't store the ID of like the landing page on a user, but what you could do is create a custom object in HubSpot that's like affiliate, and you can have a user property on that affiliate, which corresponds to that person's user. And then what you should be able to do is then also have a, like, whether it's the full landing page URL or an ID or something that matches that, you should be able to put that into that custom object as a property. And then your coded action would say on deal create, go find what is that unique string, go search the system using the CRM object search API for that record. What is the custom object that has this ID, and find it, and then link it to this record and update the owner to match the user property on that custom object. And you should be able to build that. And that should theoretically also be like infinitely scalable, because as you add more affiliates, you would just create a new affiliate object. You'd paste their checkout URL or some other ID. And that should be able to work for you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm wondering also too, if you could set those users, because you did confirm they're users in HubSpot. So I think we want to be able to set those users as the owner on those records, right? Which you should be able to do through a custom coded action for sure. Because the thing is you have that unique identifier coming in. The question is like, all right, we have a URL. How do we first pull the unique identifier out of the URL if all of the URLs are pretty similar? This is a tongue twister. And then how do we take that and then set the HubSpot owner of that deal or that custom object that Connor is referencing and assign the right owner to it, right? Maybe you have like a database of like, here's their unique identifier and here's their email address for their HubSpot user. And it references that then to assign the right user, right? And then either they're looking at a dashboard of deal records coming from the e-commerce pipeline or something along those lines. Yeah.
I have one in here from Ashley, which is, could it be used to see if a row is created or updated on a connected Google Sheet to create or update a contact or deal and push additional lifecycle information back to the Google Sheet? There are a lot of ways you could potentially do this. So one of the things in Operations Hub is that the trigger for your code has to happen inside of HubSpot. So what you could do is you could have something that says when a contact is updated or when something changes on a contact, go request information from this Google Sheet and see if it has updated information. And then if so, update that contact, and you should be able to do that. You could also take a look at something lighter weight. I know Zapier has some triggers off of new row added to Google Sheet that they can be a little bit wonky. And then I would also look at for pushing all of the information into Google Sheets from HubSpot. I'd look at like Supermetrics as a great marketplace tool. And that's what their product does, and it does it really well. But those are some ways that you might be able to tackle that problem, Ashley.
Daniel has a super cool question. So he says, how to create a name from an email address. Let's say the simple first name, last name at domain.com for a contact that lacks the name information, right? First of all, PSA, require name on your form fields. Like, let's just say that. But this is a great question, right? So in this case, a custom coded action would be your best way to at least attempt to do this. And when I say attempt, I don't mean you can't write the code, but I mean, everyone's emails are going to be like different, and like you can't write code that would account for every possible way someone would represent their name in an email, but there are common ways people do it, kind of like you're pointing out here, right? So for example, if you were to create a custom coded action that says, all right, when someone fills out a form, run this custom coded action. However you write the code would maybe check the email, and if it shows up in formats that maybe it understands, and again, you have to code this together, you could then say, pull out this information, and then in the next workflow action, set either the first name or the last name based on the values pulled out. Is it going to be accurate 100% of the time? Probably not, but could it give you some information to go on? Sure. It really just depends on like how much work you'd want to put into the custom code for that. And again, I'm not a coder, so I don't know exactly what that would look like, but in theory, you could totally accomplish it. Sales-driven imports, hard to convince to do enriched data. I got you, Daniel.
Daniel's a client of ours. And I think we could do this, Daniel. And I think the main thing that would be there would be we could check like is left of the @ sign, is there a period? And if yes, like split those into the two sides, and it would work for that format. I think the difficulty will be like the volume of formats, right? Like my email is Connor at Aptitude 8, but that's wouldn't be any different if my last name was Honor and my first name was Carl and it was just C Honor at Aptitude 8. Like it wouldn't know what to do. And so I think that there's an element of like, there are a lot of formats for that specific format. I think that one is parsable because it has some delimiters in it as part of it, but I think you'd run into some constraints on other types of formats. The other thing I might look into, as opposed to doing it that way, would be looking into enrich tools like a ZoomInfo or an InCycle, or there's Seamless, like there's a bunch of them. And I think that most of them can do a from email find this other information. And that may be able to resolve that also without necessarily having to code something. Oh, cool. Brian. So this is one from Brian Taylor. I think if you want to take this one, because I think you could just do this with Service Hub.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, and Connor check me on this one, but I'm pretty sure in this case, like you could run a workflow that sees when a ticket gets created and then just automatically sends an email, right? So yeah, whether that's I think in settings, I don't even know that you need to do it in a workflow, because I think you can do this in Service Starter. And this is one of the reasons I remember I complained about this to a product manager at some point. And I was like, hey, how come this isn't in a workflow? And they're like, oh man, because some people don't have workflows. And I was like, oh, cool, that makes sense. And so you should be able to, in service settings, have a like ticket received confirmation that you can configure directly inside of HubSpot. Oh, Brian said they're not using tickets. I would use a ticket would be my answer. I think so. In order to do any automation I think there are conversation workflows now. So if you have it coming into a conversations inbox, let me triple check that that's true. Yeah, there is conversations based. So if you have that inbox set up to a conversation in HubSpot, you should be able to do the same thing, which is a conversation exists. Send an email to someone that's like, hey, we've received your email. We'll get back to you in the next X amount of time. I would also encourage you to generate tickets from those, because tickets are far more powerful and full featured than conversations. But if you did not want to generate a ticket, you could use a conversation based workflow and send those automated email received messages for sure. Yep. Can you use custom coded workflows to invite a specific person to meetings that are booked via a meetings link? i.e. each sales rep has their own meetings link synced with their calendar. Is it possible to invite other alias meetings so we all have an overview of all meetings in one calendar?
Maybe. So I'm gonna question that. I don't know that I would do this way. One is I'm pretty sure you could view all meetings in HubSpot regardless of who they're booked with. And so I think that you can achieve this without necessarily adding everybody to it. And you would just have this in like a report or a table or something else to that effect. And that's one way to kind of handle this. The other way that I can think of is on all of your meeting links, you could add like an additional person to all of them. So like most of our sales links, for instance, like have me for solutions engineering calls. And if you added another calendar and that calendar was just like master sales calendar, you should be able to do that directly in the meeting configuration. I don't know if you could, from the meeting being generated in HubSpot, add an invitee. And I think that that would be harder and more complicated than just like adding an additional attendee in your meeting links. And because it depends, like, are you going to Google Calendar? Are you going to 365? Like going and adding another invitee, and then does that invitee have to accept? And like calendaring is one of those things that's actually very complicated, and Google's done an amazing job of making it look simple. But I think I would solve that either by just looking in HubSpot or by adding another invitee to your calendar links. Do you have anything that you can think of, Max, in addition?
Yeah, well, and Kristen, I'm going to apologize if I'm completely missing the mark here, right? But it's looking that you want to do this so you can see an overview of all your meetings in one calendar. We, on our SE team and every team I've ever been a part on HubSpot, we all share our calendars with each other. So on the left-hand side of Google Calendar, for example, I can just check everybody's name and I could see literally like everyone's calendar event right there. So, I mean, that's what we do. I don't know if that's exactly what you were looking for, but that's kind of like would be my like easy equivalent of it, instead of like having to like do something through HubSpot. It's adding a bunch of people. Because the other thing that like might be like a little weird there too, is when it's adding people to meetings in HubSpot and those email addresses are synced to HubSpot, that could cause some funky stuff with like your reporting and like activity reporting maybe too as well. So yeah.
Cool.
So Danielle asked,
Danielle Opsa makes lead routing easy. So what we're talking about is pretty advanced lead routing. I think what you're looking for is just like Sales Hub Pro. It's very likely what you're looking for. I don't know if you're already a Sales Hub Pro customer, but Danielle's question was, you mentioned Ops Hub makes lead routing easy. Does it make sending internal notification emails easier too? I would not describe what Operations Hub does as make things easy. I would describe Operations Hub as it makes things much, much more powerful. And I would say that like the Sales Hub Pro tier has super native, easy to use lead rotation routing assignment and workflow driven notifications. And I think that might be what you're looking for. And if you're looking for something easier than that tool, give us some more context, and happy to answer it. But if you're not using Sales Hub Starter or Pro, I would take a look into that, because I think that's maybe what you're looking for.
All right,
cool. We have time for maybe one more question if someone has one. Otherwise, we'll switch to wrap up. Before we do that, if we jump to the next slide here in terms of contacting either of us, I think we have emails on here. Nice. If you want to email me about any and all things Operations Hub, HubSpot, you're looking for support on any of these products or tools, please send me an email. I'm happy to chat with you. Hit me up on LinkedIn. Check out the Aptitude 8 website. We'd love to help you. Our goal is to make HubSpot awesome and more powerful, and help you achieve your hopes and HubSpot dreams. And Max, how should people get in touch with you, man?
Well, I mean, reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's where you're going to see
follow
the majority
Max
of
on
my
LinkedIn
content.
if you want to have the best
also
time.
if anyone is in the pit of despair that is TikTok, all my content comes from there. I just try to make light of the ridiculous world that we all live in, and of sales, marketing, service, operations, business in general. So yeah, would love to see you there. And
I recommend Max's LinkedIn page. It's worth a follow.
I do my best.
Cool.
There's Will had one question. HubSpot links to GitHub to provide code for Operations Hub. Is there another source to get code? I can follow up and we can figure that out. I think the big places like I'm always directing people to, and Will, you probably already know this, is the developer documentation, right? But in terms of like if you're talking about like the code for like some of the pre-built examples for custom coded workflows, I'd imagine they're putting them in GitHub to make it like easy for folks that, you know, use GitHub to get it. I don't know if they have plans to put it in like a different repository, but, you know, again, all of this is very like historically new. So I'd imagine that the more demand there is to put this stuff in other places, they'll listen and they'll make it more accessible in different places too as well. So
I would also recommend another guest that we had on a previous episode, another solutions engineer at HubSpot, Jack Koldrick. He's worth a follow on LinkedIn. He writes great content on Operations Hub and has lots of coded examples that you can copy paste as well. I'll throw his LinkedIn in the chat. But Jack is somebody worth following as well. He has lots of great content on custom code examples and how you can do some of that too. Cool.
Absolutely.
Sounds good. Well, thanks so much, everybody. Max, thank you a million. This was an absolute blast. And
super fun.
We'll catch you guys all in the next workshop series that we'll do something with Jan here in the next couple months, I'm sure.
Sweet. Thank you, everybody. Hit me up on LinkedIn.
Thanks, guys.
I'll see you there.
Have a good day, guys. Bye.